What if a single decision costs you everything? It's not just your savings, not just your confidence, but your entire future. This is the true story of Landon, the story you need to hear so you don't make the same mistake. Landon didn't come from wealth. He came from worksheets. From the time he was 11, watched his mother balance grocery store coupons with surgical precision, while his dad rebuilt his credit, one secured card at a time. That wasn't trauma. It was training. It made Landon into someone who believed that success wasn't given, it was calculated. In college, while his friends were maxing out student loans on spring break trips and late-night Uber Eats, Landon was the guy running a campus spreadsheet on cashback credit cards. He lived lean, not because he had to, but because he saw life like a puzzle. And he was determined to win the game without rolling the dice. After graduation, he didn't chase some dream startup or try to find himself abroad. He got a solid job in logistics at a Fortune 500 company. Boring? Maybe, but stable. Predictable. Every 2 weeks the direct deposit hit, and every 2 weeks. Landon split it into his system minus 20% to a high-yield savings account, 15% to an index fund, 5% to a separate freedom fund he was building quietly. He didn't talk about money much, but when he did, he made it sound like engineering. "I'm not trying to get rich," he'd say. "I'm just trying to not be trapped." What made Landon different wasn't his intelligence, it was his patience. He was the guy who didn't get excited when the market surged or panicked when it dipped. He trusted his process. But deep down, there was something brewing, pressure he didn't talk about. By 30, Landon had hit most of the benchmarks. Decent salary, no debt, $60,000 in savings, a girlfriend who believed in his vision of slow growth, and eventual freedom. But quietly, something was off. It wasn't burnout. Not in his methods, but in whether his methods would ever be enough. He watched housing prices explode. Saw friends who bought early triple their equity in 2 years. Read articles about 25-year-olds who retired off crypto and options. And every scroll through social media whispered the same poisonous phrase: "You're being left behind." That's when he started looking for an edge, not a shortcut, an advantage, something still grounded in logic, but with the potential to move the needle. That's when he found it. Helixon Technologies. On paper, it was everything he'd ever wanted. In an investment, a bleeding-edge AI company focused on predictive logistics. Basically, the future of the very industry he worked in. Their white papers were impressive. The leadership team had Silicon Valley clout. And their valuation was undervalued, according to analysts he trusted. He didn't jump in right away. He watched, studied, watched again. He listened 2 quarterly. Calls dug through SEC filings, ran comparisons against similar companies. Even asked quiet questions in forums full of finance nerds who, like him, weren't in it for hype. They were in it for the numbers. Everything pointed to yes. So after 6 months of monitoring, Landon made his move. Not reckless, not impulsive, but full of the kind of calm confidence that only someone who did everything by the book could feel. He didn't go all in. At first, he tested with a $5,000 position. It grew 22% in 2 months. No dips, no noise. It's just quiet, stable movement. So he doubled it, doubled again, until one morning in late spring. Landon transferred nearly $64,000 into one stock. Everything he had saved over the last 8 years. Not to chase a fantasy, but to finally accelerate a future he thought he had under control. He believed he wasn't betting, he was executing a plan. What he didn't know was that the countdown had already started, and this company, the one he'd bet his life blueprint on, was already burning from the inside. For a while, everything was perfect. Landon's $64,000 investment in Helixon. Technologies didn't just grow, it thrived. Within 4 months, his position had risen to just under $94,000. It was quiet, steady progress. No wild pumps, no Reddit hype, just green candles and quarterly growth that mirrored the company's press releases, all packed with phrases like disruptive logistics, AI-driven efficiencies, and market domination in under 36 months. To Landon, it felt like confirmation, not just of the stock, but of himself. Every small win reinforced the idea that this wasn't luck. This was the result of discipline. The payoff for years of living below his means, of skipping impulse buys, of holding back while others rushed. Now it was his turn not to get rich, but to get free. He started to dream bigger, but quietly. A home office instead of a cubicle. A ring for his girlfriend. Maybe a small property just outside the city, where they could eventually raise a family. He never told anyone how much he'd invested, not even her. Just said things are moving in the right direction. But behind the scenes, Landon had become addicted, not to money, but to control. Every day he checked earnings reports. Every weekend, he read market analyses. He wasn't chasing hype. He was chasing certainty. And as Helixson rose, so did his belief that he'd cracked the code, but that belief made him blind. There were signs. Not red flags, not yet, but flickers of something off in a Q&A session. The CEO dodged a question about delayed contracts. Respected analyst raised concerns about Helixson's inflated R&D numbers. Partner company suddenly pulled out of a deal with no official statement. Small things. It's easy to ignore. It's easy to file under normal market behavior. But the worst sign came in the form of silence. Suddenly, Helixson stopped updating investors with the same enthusiasm. No more weekly social media engagement. No more ambitious roadmaps. Just generic PR releases. Sterile, polished, and vague. Landon noticed. But his confirmation bias was already working overtime. He remembered the early gains, the press coverage, the feeling of watching his portfolio rise without needing to take big risks. He told himself that the slowdown was temporary, that Helixson was simply entering a new, more mature phase, so he held. And the irony? That was exactly what he had trained himself to do. Hold. Trust the process. Stick to the plan. But this wasn't a dip. It was the beginning of a landslide. And Landon had no idea how close to the edge he really was. Then came the leak. Started on a Reddit thread barely anyone followed. A post by a supposed ex-employee who claimed that Helixson had been exaggerating its AI capabilities to inflate investor confidence. Landon saw the thread, dismissed it. Next came a Medium article that broke down Helixson's financial inconsistencies, showing how their licensing deals didn't actually generate revenue, but were instead based on speculative valuation. Swaps. That got shared. Then picked up. Then retweeted by a prominent financial influencer. Still, Landon stayed calm. He had read fear-mongering before. He didn't sell. Then came the email. Not a newsletter, not a headline. It's an actual email from his brokerage platform with the subject line, Urgent Volatility Notice, Helixson Technologies. By the time Landon opened the app, the stock had dropped 18% in 2 hours. He refreshed the page 3 times. Thinking it was a glitch, it wasn't. Helixson was under review by the SEC for potential material misrepresentation of AI deployment and partner disclosures. And just like that, the company that had once felt like a golden parachute now looked more like a flaming wreck falling out of the sky. Landon still didn't sell. It's not out of greed, but out of denial. He told himself it would bounce back. Told himself this was just panic selling. Told himself that intelligent investors hold through chaos. But deep down, he felt it. The foundation was cracking. And in the space between knowing something is wrong and accepting that it's over, Landon made the most dangerous decision of all. He waited. At first, Landon checked the news every hour. He wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for an out. A silver lining, a clause in the SEC review that would frame everything as a misunderstanding, a bounce, a press release that would calm the market and validate everything he had worked for. But that never came. Instead, the headlines got worse. It's not louder, quieter, more serious, less sensational, more surgical. Words like misleading, insider activity, and pending litigation began to surface. A leaked memo revealed that Helixson's top leadership had sold off significant shares, weeks before the investigation was announced. A well-known hedge fund quietly removed Helixson from its portfolio. No announcement. It's just a line in a quarterly report. But to Landon, it felt like watching the last passenger sneak off a sinking ship. By the end of the week, stock had plummeted 62%. Landon's $94,000 position was now worth around $35,000 less than what he had started with 2 years earlier. But he still didn't sell. Why? Because selling meant admitting it was over. Selling meant admitting that everything he believed about control, planning, and calculated risk was wrong. And people like Landon, who build their identity around doing things the right way, don't collapse easily. They erode. He stopped sleeping, started lying, telling his girlfriend work was just stressful when really he was waking up at 3 a.m. to refresh stock tickers and reread regulatory filings he didn't fully understand. His life shrank. Social invites? Ignored. Gym routine? Forgotten. Even food became a task. Just calories to keep the body moving while the mind scrambled for a way out. Then came the margin call. What Landon hadn't told anyone, not even himself, fully, was that in the final days of Helixson's rise, he had taken out a low-interest portfolio loan. Only $8,000. Just enough to maximize his position before the breakout. Now, that small loan became a financial anchor tied to a sinking asset. He received the call on a Tuesday afternoon. Your account has triggered a maintenance threshold. You must deposit $11,200 within 48 hours, or positions will be liquidated. Landon froze. He didn't have $11,200 in cash. He didn't even have $1,200. His savings were tied up. His fallback funds were gone. His bank account barely had enough to cover rent. He called the brokerage, waited on hold for 42 minutes, asked if there was another option. There wasn't. On Thursday morning, Landon's positions were forcibly sold. At a loss, final total, $4,981. That's all that remained of the $94,000 portfolio, which itself had taken him almost a decade to build. But the crash wasn't just about numbers. It was the identity fracture that followed. Landon wasn't the kind of guy who made bad financial decisions. He was the disciplined one, the strategic thinker. The guy who helped friends build budgets and taught coworkers about Roth IRAs during lunch breaks. Now he was just lost. He didn't talk about it, not to his girlfriend, not to his parents, not even to himself in the mirror. He just carried it, like a secret failure stitched into his skin. It didn't stop with the investment. Either the debt from the portfolio loan ballooned with interest and late fees. He started putting groceries on credit, stopped contributing to his 401k, even pulled out early from his emergency fund, swallowing the penalty like it was punishment he deserved. The worst part? No one saw it coming. Not his girlfriend. Not his friends. Not even his mentor at work, who once called Landon the most level-headed guy in the office. That's the thing about slow disasters. They look like calm, until they're chaos. And when they hit people like Landon, the careful ones, the planners, the spreadsheet kings, they don't just cost money, they take everything. Next came a Medium article that broke down Helixson's financial inconsistencies, showing how their licensing deals didn't actually generate revenue, but were instead based on speculative valuation swaps that got shared and picked up, then retweeted by a prominent financial influencer. Still, Landon stayed calm. He had read fear-mongering before, didn't sell. Then came the email. Not a newsletter, not a headline. It's an actual email from his brokerage platform with the subject line, Urgent Volatility Notice. Helixson Technologies. By the time Landon opened the app, the stock had dropped 18% in 2 hours. He refreshed the page 3 times. Thinking it was a glitch, it wasn't. Helixson was under review by the SEC for potential material misrepresentation of AI deployment and partner disclosures. And just like that, the company that had once felt like a golden parachute now looked more like a flaming wreck falling out of the sky. Landon still didn't sell. It's not out of greed, but out of denial. He told himself it would bounce back. Told himself this was just panic selling. Told himself that intelligent investors hold through chaos. But deep down, he felt it. The foundation was cracking, and in the space between knowing something is wrong and accepting that it's over, Landon made the most dangerous decision of all. He waited. When the dust finally settled, Landon wasn't bankrupt. He wasn't homeless. He didn't go viral for a dramatic fall from grace. There were no news stories, no sympathetic Reddit threads, no warning signs taped to a whiteboard and some finance influencers cautionary TIKTOK to the outside world. Landon just looked a little tired, but inside, something had fundamentally broken. The portfolio was gone. $72,000 in total losses between the stock crash, the loan, the interest, and the fees, all real. all devastating. But the numbers weren't what haunted him. It was the silence. The silence in the morning when he opened his banking app and saw a balance too low to cover rent. The silence in the evenings staring at job boards trying to figure out how to earn more without looking desperate. The silence in conversations where people casually mentioned investments and he had to nod along, pretending he still belonged in that world. Eventually, Landon had to confess the situation to his girlfriend. He waited too long, of course. By the time he opened up, she wasn't angry. She was hurt. Not because he had lost money, but because he had carried that loss alone. While pretending things were fine, they didn't break up, but something between them fractured. Maybe more safety. The belief that they were building a future together, now put on indefinite hold. To make ends meet, Landon picked up freelance gigs on top of his full-time job, then rideshare, driving on weekends, and tutoring high school kids in math. A bitter irony, considering his own financial implosion. 3 jobs, 7 days a week. 6 hours of sleep on a good night, not to build wealth, just to crawl out of the hole. And here's the kicker. Even after all of that, Landon didn't blame Helixon. He didn't even really blame himself. What he blamed was the idea he had bought into. The dreams sold in podcasts and YouTube thumbnails. The myth that smart money doesn't work hard, it works clever, that if you just study long enough, invest. Smart enough, play it right. You can skip the grind. You can cheat time. You can hack freedom. But that's not what happened. What happened was a man followed all the rules he thought were real and still got crushed. He realized something. Most people never admit. Even the smart ones lose. Even the prepared. Disciplined, spreadsheet-driven, good investors can get wrecked. Because sometimes, it's not about what you did right or wrong. It's about what was never really true to begin with. Helixon wasn't a shortcut. It was a facade dressed like opportunity, and Landon, it was just one of thousands who wanted out of the rat race and accidentally ran off a cliff. He still checks the market. He still invests, carefully, small amounts, index funds only. But the fire is gone. The belief that he could one day escape the system extinguished. Now he plays defense. Now he saves to survive, not to thrive. Now he understands that some dreams cost more than they're worth, especially the ones that promise you won't have to work for them. And every night, before collapsing into bed after another double shift, Landon hears that whisper in his mind. Never again. But even that, he's starting to doubt. Don't wait until it's too late to question the dream you're chasing. If you're relying on hype to buy your freedom, you might already be selling your future. Learn from Landon. Pause, think, and protect yourself. Subscribe for more real stories they don't want you to hear.